The hospital room was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the world itself was holding its breath. Machines hummed softly, monitors blinked with steady green lines, and outside the window, the city kept moving as if nothing inside this room had stopped. But something had stopped. Something important. Emma Carlyle stared at the ceiling, her eyes unfocused, her expression blank. The white tiles above her were cracked in places, the lines forming shapes she had memorized over weeks of lying still. She knew every shadow, every flicker of fluorescent light. She could tell the time of day by how bright the room felt without ever turning her head. She didn't bother trying to move her legs anymore. They hadn't answered her in months. At the foot of the bed stood her father, Richard Carlyle, CEO of one of the largest tech firms in the country. A man known for boardroom dominance, ruthless negotiations, and billion-dollar decisions that moved markets. Yet here, in this sterile hospital room, he looked smaller, older, powerless. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly as he held a paper cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "Emma," he said softly, for the 100th time that day. "The doctors are optimistic. They think another program might help." She didn't respond. Richard swallowed hard. He had bought her the best care. Private specialists, experimental treatments, physical therapists flown in from other states. Nothing had changed the truth she now lived with. The accident had taken everything. 3 months earlier, Emma had been unstoppable. 22 years old, college graduate, marathon runner. She volunteered at shelters on weekends, laughed loudly, loved fiercely. She had been driving home from a charity event when a drunk driver ran a red light and shattered her future in a single, violent moment. The damage to her spine was severe. Permanent, the doctors said carefully. From the waist down, nothing worked anymore. At first, Emma had screamed, cried, begged. She had tried every therapy with desperation burning in her chest. She had believed she could fight her way back to herself. But hope was exhausting, and eventually she stopped trying. Now she barely spoke, barely ate, barely looked at anyone. Richard leaned closer to her bed. "Please," he whispered, "just don't give up on me." Her eyes flickered briefly toward him, then back to the ceiling. "I already did," she said quietly. The words shattered him. Days later, Richard made a decision that surprised everyone around him. Against the advice of his assistants and doctors, he insisted Emma be transferred to a specialized rehabilitation center outside the city. Not a luxury facility, not a place built on cutting-edge technology and sterile perfection. A place that focused on emotional healing. Emma didn't argue. She didn't care enough to. The center was quieter, surrounded by trees instead of skyscrapers. Sunlight filtered through tall windows. The air smelled like pine and something warm and human. On her second morning there, Emma noticed him. He was pushing a stroller down the hallway, talking softly to a little girl walking beside him. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see the way his daughter laughed, the sound carried in her smile. The man wasn't remarkable at first glance. Early 30s, worn jacket, tired eyes. He looked like someone who lived life without shortcuts. He stopped when he noticed Emma watching him. "Hi," he said gently. "Mind if we pass through?" She shrugged slightly. He smiled at her anyway. "This is Lily," he gestured to the girl. "She insists on coming everywhere with me." Lily waved enthusiastically. "Daddy says helping people is important." Emma looked away. They passed by, and she didn't think about them again, until the next day. And the day after that. He was always there in the therapy room, in the courtyard, sitting quietly with Lily while she colored. Always patient, always gentle. One afternoon, Emma wheeled herself outside alone. The sky was pale blue, the sun soft. She parked near a bench and stared at nothing. "Mind if we sit here?" a voice asked. She turned her head. It was him again. She didn't answer. He took that as permission and sat, Lily hopping up beside him. The stroller was empty today. "I'm Daniel, single dad, full-time learner." Emma stayed silent. "I hear you used to run," he said casually. She stiffened. "Who told you that?" "Your father," he replied. "He talks when he's tired." She scoffed. "Figures." "I lost my wife 3 years ago," Daniel said quietly. "Car accident." Emma's breath caught. "I didn't think I'd survive it. Then Lily needed breakfast and shoes and bedtime stories." Emma stared at her hands. "She saved me," he said simply. Something cracked inside her. Over the next few weeks, Daniel didn't push. He didn't preach. He didn't promise miracles. He just showed up, every day, sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone. He listened. One afternoon, Emma finally exploded. "What's the point?" she snapped. "I can't walk, I can't run, I can't even feel my legs. You don't know what this is like." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right, I don't." She waited for him to leave. Instead, he knelt in front of her wheelchair. "But I do know what it's like to lose the life you thought you'd have, and to wake up every day wondering why you're still here." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'll help you," he whispered, "if you'll let me." Something about his voice, steady, sincere, made him believe him. Therapy changed after that. Emma still couldn't walk, but she started trying again. Daniel learned everything about spinal injuries. He attended sessions. He encouraged her without pity. He celebrated the smallest victories. Lily cheered every time Emma lifted herself from the chair. Richard watched from a distance, confused and humbled. One evening, Emma asked her father to wheel her outside. "I don't want to die like this," she said quietly. Richard's hands shook. "You won't," he promised. Months passed. Emma didn't walk, but she lived. She volunteered. She mentored other patients. She laughed again. One afternoon, she spoke words that changed everything. "Daniel," she said softly, "thank you for not fixing me." He smiled. "You didn't need fixing." On a spring morning, Emma stood at a podium in her wheelchair, addressing a room full of people. "My life broke," she said, "but someone reminded me it wasn't over." Daniel stood in the back, Lily on his shoulders. Richard wiped tears from his eyes. Hope hadn't come the way they expected, but it had come. And sometimes, that was enough.